tell me the truth. Whose bait are you carrying?
I swear I've never touched another man.
Then explain why this says I'm not the father.
That's impossible.
No, please!
Then someone inside my family is trying to destroy us.
Alma's heart slammed against her ribs, because in that moment, she realized something that changed everything. She had arrived in Korea 3 months ago to investigate a financial crime. She had followed a money trail through 3 continents and 17 shell companies, and one name that kept appearing at the center of everything like a spider at the center of a web. Kang Holdings. She had walked into that building prepared for corruption, for manipulation, for danger. She had not been prepared for him. And she had not been prepared for the truth that was now crashing down around her like the shattered glass of this penthouse. That the baby in her womb, the man shielding her body, and the bullet that had just killed his guard were all connected to the same mastermind. The same person who had orchestrated everything from the beginning. 3 months earlier, Serwaa Owusu had stepped off a plane at Incheon International Airport with 1 carry-on bag, a forensic accounting certification, and the kind of quiet, dangerous focus that had made her the best in her firm at 31 years old. Seoul in December hit her like a wall. The cold was different here, sharp and clean, not the heavy humid cold of Accra. She stood outside arrivals and breathed it in and told herself this was just another contract. 6 weeks. Follow the money. File the report. Go home. Her firm had been contracted by an international financial oversight body to audit suspicious transactions flowing through several major Korean corporations. The brief was straightforward on paper. In practice, it was a maze. Hundreds of millions of dollars were moving through accounts with no clear origin, no clear destination, and paper trails that dissolved the moment you tried to follow them. But Alma had a gift. She could see patterns in numbers the way other people saw patterns in faces. She could look at a financial statement and feel where the lie was hiding before she could prove it. And every trail she followed kept circling back to one company, Kang Holdings. She spent her first week in Seoul doing what she always did, reading. Not the public filings, which were immaculate. Not the quarterly reports, which were works of art. She read the footnotes, the subsidiary disclosures, the intercompany loan agreements buried in appendices that no one was meant to actually read. By day 8, she had found something. A series of financial transfers, small enough individually to escape automated flagging, but forming a pattern when you mapped them across 18 months. Money flowing from Kang Holdings subsidiaries into a constellation of holding companies registered in jurisdictions with no information sharing agreements. Cayman Islands, Vanuatu, the Isle of Man. And from those holding companies, the money simply vanished. She requested a meeting. She did not expect to get one. She absolutely did not expect the meeting to be with him. The boardroom on the 40th floor of Kang Tower was the kind of room designed to make people feel small. Glass walls on 3 sides, Seoul spread out below like a circuit board, every surface polished to a mirror finish. When Alma walked in, there were 7 men already seated. Lawyers, she guessed, and financial advisors, and the kind of executive assistants who knew exactly how to look pleasant while communicating contempt. And at the head of the table, Kang Min-Jae. She had seen his photograph. Everyone who did business in Seoul had seen his photograph. But photographs hadn't captured the quality of stillness he had. The way he sat in a room like the room had been built around him, like gravity worked slightly differently in his vicinity. He was younger than she expected. Early 30s. Dark hair, sharp jaw. A suit that probably cost more than her monthly salary. His eyes moved to her the moment she walked in, and they stayed there. Not the way men sometimes looked at her, assessing, dismissive, calculating whether she was worth their time. He looked at her the way she looked at financial statements, like he was reading something underneath the surface. She sat down, opened her laptop, and said without preamble, "Mr. Kang, I need you to explain the Meridian transfers." The room went very quiet. One of the lawyers cleared his throat. "Miss Owusu, perhaps we should begin with the Meridian transfers," Alma repeated, pulling up her screen. 47 transactions between March and September of last year. Each one under the reporting threshold. Collectively, $230 million US. Routed through Kang Holdings subsidiaries into 3 holding companies with no disclosed beneficial ownership. I'd like to understand what legitimate business purpose these transfers served. The lawyers were looking at each other. The advisors were looking at their phones. One man was already typing something urgently under the table. Min-Jae hadn't moved. He was still watching her. Where did you find those? He said. Appendix G of the Consolidated Subsidiary Disclosure. It's in the public filing. Most people skip appendices. Most auditors skip appendices. I'm not most auditors. Something shifted in his expression. Not anger. She had braced for anger. Something more complicated than that. Clear the room, he said quietly. The lawyers looked alarmed. Sir, we strongly advise. I said clear the room. They filed out. All 7 of them, gathering their things with the practiced efficiency of people who understood that when Kang Min-Jae used that particular tone, discussion was over. Then it was just the 2 of them, 40 floors above Seoul, with $230 million missing dollars between them. He leaned forward. Those transfers weren't authorized by me. Amma looked at him for a long moment. Then who authorized them? That, he said, his voice dropping to something quiet and dangerous, is what I've been trying to find out for 6 months. She had not expected that. She had expected denial, deflection, legal intimidation. She had not expected him to look at her with those dark, direct eyes and hand her the first thread of a truth she wasn't ready for. She pulled her laptop closer. Tell me everything you know. If you're watching this right now, drop a comment telling us where you're watching from and what's pulling you in, because this story is just getting started. Subscribe to Oyinelle Afro-Korean Romance and hit the bell so you never miss an episode. Like this video and share it. Let's build this community together. The next 2 weeks were the most professionally intense of Amma's life. Min-Jae gave her access to internal financial systems that no outside auditor had ever seen. She worked from a secure office on the 38th floor, surrounded by servers, eating takeout at midnight, mapping money flows on whiteboards that stretched across entire walls. His head of internal security, a quiet man named Park Soo-hyun who moved like a retired soldier and said approximately 12 words per day, stood outside her office door from 8 in the morning until she left at night. Min-Jae himself appeared twice a day, once in the morning, to ask what she had found, once in the evening, to review what she had built. He was not warm exactly. He was direct, precise, and completely intolerant of vagueness. But he listened in a way that most powerful men didn't. Not waiting for his turn to speak, but actually absorbing, actually thinking. She found herself looking forward to the evening reviews in a way that troubled her. She ignored that and kept working. By the end of the second week, she had found something that made her put down her pen and sit very still for a long moment. The money being moved out of Kang Holdings wasn't going to competitors. It wasn't being skimmed into personal accounts. She had checked every executive, every board member, every person with financial access. The money was being transferred to a network of companies she had never seen referenced in any financial crime briefing. Medical research facilities, biotech firms, fertility clinics, 17 of them across 9 countries. It made absolutely no sense. She spent 3 days trying to find the connection between a mafia-adjacent Korean conglomerate and a global network of fertility clinics. She found nothing obvious. But the money trail was undeniable, clean, deliberate, and enormous. Nearly $400 million over 2 years, flowing into organizations that specialized in reproductive technology and genetic research. She brought it to Min-Jae that evening. He stared at the chart for a long time. I don't understand this, he said. And the thing that frightened her was that he looked genuinely lost, which was not a quality she associated with him at all. Neither do I, she said. But whoever is moving this money knows your systems well enough to hide it for 2 years. That means it's someone with deep access. Someone you trust. He was quiet for a long time. Then he looked up at her. How long will it take you to narrow it down to a person? A few weeks. Maybe more. He nodded once. Then you stay. She should have said no. Her contract was for 6 weeks of general audit work, not an internal criminal investigation inside a crime syndicate. Her firm hadn't signed off on this. She had no legal protection here, no institutional backing, no exit strategy if this went wrong. But $400 million was flowing somewhere for a reason, and Serwaa Owusu had never in her life walked away from an incomplete equation. I stay, she said. She did not know yet what that agreement would cost her. The charity gala was held 3 weeks into her extended contract, at a hotel in Gangnam that made Kong Tower look modest. Min-Jae had insisted she attend. Her presence as an auditor added a layer of corporate legitimacy to the evening. She wore a deep gold dress she had bought that afternoon in a panic, and spent the first hour standing near the drinks table, watching how people moved around Min-Jae the way water moves around a stone in a river. She was reaching for a second glass of champagne when she heard them. 2 men, half hidden behind a column to her left, speaking in Korean. Her Korean was good enough. She had been studying intensively since the contract began. And what she heard made the glass freeze halfway to her lips. It has to be tonight. The security rotation gives us 4 minutes. The shooter is in position on the east terrace. Once Kang is in the corridor between the ballroom and the private dining room, it's clean. A pause. What about the woman? The auditor. She's not the target. Not yet. Alma set her glass down very carefully. Her heart was slamming. She scanned the room for Min-Jae and found him across the ballroom, deep in conversation with 3 men in dark suits. She moved. She crossed the room faster than was graceful, cut through a cluster of guests, and materialized at his elbow. I need to speak with you, she said quietly. Right now. He glanced at her. Something in her face made him excuse himself immediately. She pulled him 2 steps away and lowered her voice to almost nothing. There are men planning to kill you tonight. In the corridor between the ballroom and the private dining room. 4-minute window in the security rotation. Shooter on the east terrace. He looked at her for exactly 1 second. How do you know this? I heard them. Who? The lights went out. Total darkness. Ballroom, exits, emergency lighting, all of it. A beat of stunned silence. And then the screaming started. And then the gunfire. And Alma grabbed Min-Jae's arm in the dark and ran. She didn't know the hotel. She had no idea where the service corridors were, where the exits were, whether they were running toward danger or away from it. She just ran, pulling him behind her, following the faint glow of an emergency exit sign she had clocked automatically when she arrived. Old habit, one her father had drilled into her, always know where the doors are. They burst through a service door into a concrete stairwell. The gunfire faded. She pressed against the wall, breathing hard, still gripping his arm. In the faint red emergency light, Min-Jae looked at her. You just saved my life, he said. I heard men planning to kill you, she said, still catching her breath. What was I supposed to do? He was quiet for a moment that stretched longer than it should have. Most people, he said slowly, would have decided that was not their problem. I'm not most people. He had said that to her once. She watched him remember it. Something changed in his face then. Not dramatic. Min-Jae's face rarely did anything dramatic. But something opened, briefly, like a door in a wall she hadn't known was there. Then it closed again. Come, he said. We need to move. He didn't let go of her hand. The next morning, Park Soo-hyun appeared at her office door with a message. Min-Jae wanted to see her. She expected a debrief, a thank you, perhaps a conversation about security protocols. She got something else entirely. I want you to move into the penthouse, he said. It's the most secure location in the city, and I need you close while we continue the investigation. Move in. Yes. Into your penthouse. The building has its own security infrastructure, biometric access on every floor, and 12 permanent guards on rotation. Nothing gets within 300 meters without clearance. He paused. You heard those men last night, because you were alone and unguarded. That won't happen again. She wanted to argue. She rehearsed 3 different objections on the walk to his office. But that morning before the meeting, she had found a dead crow on her apartment windowsill. And a note. Stop investigating or you die. She moved into the penthouse that afternoon. Living in proximity to Kang Min-Jae was its own education. He was up before dawn every morning. She could hear him in the gym on the floor below. The sound of weights and controlled breathing, and sometimes a punching bag taking punishment that told her whatever he was working through, he hadn't resolved it yet. He ate quickly and without much interest in food, treating meals as operational necessities. He read constantly, strategy, economics, history, occasionally fiction that he never admitted to. He had a habit of standing at the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Seoul, and going very still for long minutes. And she could never tell if he was thinking or simply existing in a way that required no thought at all. He was patient with her security detail and ruthless with anyone who wasted his time. He was not easy. He was not comfortable. He was not safe. And somewhere around the third week of living in his orbit, Alma made the alarming discovery that she had stopped thinking of him as a subject of investigation and started thinking of him as a person. That was when the situation became genuinely dangerous. It was Min-Jae who raised the idea of the contract marriage. He came to her office, her makeshift investigation room in the penthouse's east wing, walls covered in printed charts and string and sticky notes, and sat down across from her with the look of a man who had thought through every angle of something and was not entirely happy with the conclusion he had reached. "The syndicate is showing weakness," he said. "Rival organizations are testing our borders. Our allies are asking questions about internal stability." And she kept her eyes on her screen. "My advisors believe a visible partnership, specifically a marriage, would consolidate my position publicly." She looked up. "They're suggesting you marry someone. They're suggesting I marry you." The office went very quiet. She stopped. Started again. "That's not a real solution to a political problem. In this world, perception is reality. A wife who is a credentialed forensic accountant, who has been working closely with me, who is visibly trusted. It signals stability, intelligence, control." He paused. "It would also give you formal protection under Kang family security. Your current position is technically that of a contractor. If something happened to you, nothing is going to happen to me. Something almost happened to you 3 weeks ago, and the crow suggests it will be attempted again." She looked at him for a long time. "You're proposing a business arrangement." "Yes." "In exchange for what?" He reached into his jacket and slid a folder across the desk. She opened it. Inside was a letter from a medical facility in Accra. Her father's name at the top. Outstanding balance, substantial. Treatment status, suspended pending payment. Her throat closed. "How did you?" "I know everything about the people in my building," he said. "Not unkindly. Just as fact. Your father has been ill for 8 months. The treatment facility suspended his care 6 weeks ago. Your salary covers living expenses and partial debt repayment. It does not cover a cardiac treatment program." Alma looked at the paper. Her hands were completely still. She had trained herself, years ago, not to let her face betray what her chest was doing. And right now her chest felt like it was being compressed from all sides. "You would pay for his treatment," she said. "In full. Ongoing. Whatever he needs. And the family debts. Cleared. And in return I marry you. For 2 years minimum. Publicly. With the understanding that our private lives remain our own. No obligation beyond what the role requires in formal settings." She should have said no. Any rational person would have said no. She called her brother in Accra that night. He picked up on the second ring and she could hear it immediately in his voice. The exhaustion, the strain that came from watching someone you loved get sick in a system that could save them if you just had the money. "How is he?" she asked. A pause. "Alma, they want to suspend the second phase of treatment. We can't." She closed her eyes. "Tell them not to suspend it," she said. "I'll sort it." She went back to Min-Jae's office. "I'll do it," she said. He looked at her for a moment. Then he nodded. Neither of them talked about the fact that for 1 second, just one, something moved between them in that office that had nothing to do with business arrangements or political strategy. The wedding was held 12 days later. 150 guests, all media access carefully controlled. Alma in a dress she had been given approximately 6 hours to choose, and Min-Jae in a dark suit that made him look like a king. The photographs made the front pages of 3 Korean news outlets and 1 international business publication. In the car afterward, they sat on opposite sides of the back seat and didn't speak for the first 10 minutes. Then Alma said, "Your vows were surprisingly convincing." He glanced at her. "Yours as well." A pause. We should establish ground rules, she said. Agreed. I continue the investigation without interference. Yes. My office space in the East Wing remains mine. No entry without permission. Done. And this marriage doesn't affect what I report. If I find evidence of criminal activity that needs to be disclosed, you report it. His voice was steady. That was always the understanding. She looked at him. You know, most men in your position would never agree to that. I'm not most men, he said. She had said that to him once too. This time she smiled. Just barely. And looked away before he could see it. They lived separately within the penthouse, she in the East Wing, he in the main suite, and maintained the formal public arrangement precisely as agreed. During the day they were professional, focused, efficient. At charity events and business dinners they were convincingly warm without being excessive about it. She had always been good at performance. So was he. But there were evenings. Over the dinner they shared 3 or 4 times a week because it was practical and they were both there, when the performance fell away for a few minutes. When he asked about her childhood in Accra, and she found herself telling him things she didn't usually tell people. When she asked about his father, and he went quiet for a long time and then said, carefully, that his father had loved the empire more than he had loved anything inside it. She heard what he wasn't saying. She didn't push. But she heard it. The investigation was still moving. She had narrowed the list of people with access to the financial systems enough to move the stolen funds. 7 people originally. Now 4. She was closing in on something, and she could feel it the way she always felt it. A tightening, a convergence, the numbers beginning to sing a single clear note beneath the noise. She just needed a little more time. And then the city went dark. The attack on the power grid came without warning at 11:47 p.m. on a Thursday. Not just the penthouse, the entire district. A coordinated strike on 3 substation nodes that the city's engineers said later they had never seen attempted before. Backup generators across Seoul kicked in within minutes, but the penthouse's generator had been sabotaged. Someone had been inside. Park Soo-hyun was on the phone immediately, coordinating with the outer security team, trying to establish communication with a building that was suddenly running on emergency battery packs that lit only stairwells and corridors. Alma had been in her office when it happened. She sat very still in the sudden dark, listening to the city sounds change. Distant alarms, a helicopter somewhere, the silence where electrical hum had been. Then the door opened. Min-Jae, holding a candle, an actual candle which she found strangely incongruous, and looking at her with that expression she had learned to read. The one that meant he was running 17 calculations simultaneously. The outer team can't reach us for at least 2 hours, he said. The elevator is down. The stairwells are being swept. So we wait, she said. So we wait. He sat down in the chair across from her desk. The candle between them cast everything in warm, unsteady light. Outside the windows, Seoul was a patchwork of darkness and emergency glow. They were quiet for a while. Then he said unexpectedly, "My father used to lock me in a room when I refused an order." Alma didn't move. She understood instinctively that this was not an invitation to respond. It was something coming out of him because the dark made it easier. Not often, but enough that I learned not to refuse. He looked at the candle flame. I was very good at being what he needed. I think I forgot, at some point, that there was anything else to be. How old were you? She asked quietly. The first time? 8. The silence after that was its own kind of weight. My mother used to say, Alma said eventually, that the most dangerous thing you can do is let someone convince you that their version of you is the real one. She paused. I used to think she was talking about romantic relationships. I think she meant something bigger than that. He looked at her. The candlelight made everything different, softer, closer, more honest than daylight usually allowed. How do you do it? He asked. Do what? Walk into rooms full of dangerous people, and act like you're not afraid. I am afraid. I'm just also curious. And curiosity is stronger than fear for me. He was quiet for a long moment. I think, he said, that you might be the most unusual person I've ever met. Is that a compliment? From me, he said. It's the highest one there is. She looked at him across the candle flame. And the months of tension, the proximity, the formal arrangement holding them at a careful distance, the thousand small moments of almost, all of it gathered into something that had nowhere left to go. She didn't move first. Neither did he exactly. It was more that the distance between them simply ceased to exist. And when it did, Serwaa Owusu understood, with the particular clarity that comes right before something changes everything, that this had stopped being a contract a long time ago. She just hadn't let herself know it until now. The weeks after the blackout were different. Nothing was announced, nothing was formalized. They were still careful in professional settings, still maintained the public posture of a strategic marriage. But in the private hours, over late dinners, in the quiet moments between investigation updates, in the way he started appearing in her office doorway sometimes in the evenings just to ask how she was, something had shifted into a different key. She was happy. She catalogued it the way she catalogued everything, with precision and a kind of quiet wonder. She was happy in a way that felt dangerous, because she had not come here for this and could not afford to be derailed by it. And yet there it was, solid and undeniable, like a number that refused to be explained away. She was 6 weeks past the blackout when she fainted at a charity lunch. She came back to consciousness on a hospital bed with Min-Jae standing over her looking, for the first time since she had known him, genuinely frightened. "What happened?" she asked. "You collapsed," he said. "The doctors want to run some tests." She had the tests. She lay in the hospital bed afterward looking at the ceiling, processing the results. And when Min-Jae came back in and sat down and looked at her, she said very quietly, "I'm pregnant." The silence that followed was one of the most complex she had ever sat inside. She watched him process it, watched the layers move across his face like weather systems. Shock first, then something that looked, briefly, like wonder, then confusion, then something she couldn't read. Something that tightened his jaw and pulled his eyes away from hers. He stopped. "The blackout night," she said. "It has to be. There hasn't been anyone else. There is no one else." He nodded once. But he was very still in a way that was different from his usual stillness. "Min-Jae." She sat up. "Say something." He stood. "I need a day." "A day. I just told you we're." "One day," he said. And walked out. She stared at the door for a long time. She did not know yet about the injury. She did not know that 3 years earlier, during an attack that Min-Jae had never spoken about publicly, he had sustained trauma that doctors had told him quietly and carefully might make biological fatherhood impossible. He had carried that information alone for 3 years, filed it away in the part of himself where he kept things that could not be changed, and never mentioned it to anyone, including her. So when the pregnancy announcement arrived, what she experienced as wonder and terror and joy, he experienced as something else entirely. A collision between what he wanted to believe and what a part of him, the part that had learned to survive by expecting the worst, immediately began to suspect. He ordered the DNA test privately, through a medical contact he trusted absolutely. He told himself it was just confirmation, just certainty. The results came back 7 days later. Kang Min-Jae, excluded as biological father. He sat in his office for 40 minutes without moving. Then he stood up, and his face was closed again, completely closed, and he went to find Amma. What followed was the worst 2 weeks of her life. He didn't accuse her directly. He was too controlled for that. But the distance that reappeared was brutal in its totality. The evening dinners stopped. The office doorway appearances stopped. He communicated through Park Soo-hyun and through short, formal messages that addressed practical matters and nothing else. Amma kept working because she didn't know what else to do. She kept working and she tried to reach him, and he deflected every attempt with a proficiency that told her this was not carelessness but active decision. She was 3 days into her own private spiral when Ryu Taesung appeared. She had heard the name. He was the head of a rival syndicate. Younger than Min-Jae, reputedly ruthless in different ways, someone she had encountered only as a recurring name in financial documents. He appeared at the edge of a public event she was attending in her capacity as Kang Min-Jae's wife, and he maneuvered himself next to her with the ease of someone who had planned exactly how the next 10 minutes would go. "Mrs. Kang," he said, "I have information you need." I don't take meetings with people I haven't been introduced to. You'll want to take this one. He glanced around. There's something wrong with your DNA results. She went very still. Walk with me, she said. He told her in a garden behind the event venue, speaking quietly and quickly, with the particular manner of someone handing over information they expected to be paid for eventually. 10 weeks before she had arrived in Seoul, she had attended a corporate reception in London, a transitional event between two of her firm's major contracts. She barely remembered it, a crowded room, international clients, too much warm wine. Ryu told her that she had been drugged at that event. Not incapacitated, not so she would notice, just enough to make the next 2 hours fuzzy and unreliable in memory. She had attributed the slight disorientation to travel fatigue and the wine. She had gone home, slept it off, flown to Seoul the following week. But during those 2 hours, someone had collected a biological sample. And 3 weeks later, using Min-Jae's genetic material taken through a different method she didn't yet fully understand, an embryo had been created in a laboratory, implanted, without her knowledge, without her consent. The pregnancy was real. The baby was biologically both of theirs. But the conception had been engineered, artificially, by someone who had planned this for months. Someone who wanted the DNA results to say what they said, who had manipulated the test itself, who had ensured that when the results came back, they would show Min-Jae as excluded, who had constructed the entire scenario specifically to destroy trust between them, to make it look like Amma had been unfaithful, to fracture the Kang family from the inside. Who? Amma said. Her voice was completely level. Her hands were not. I don't know the name, Ryu said. But I know it's someone inside the Kang family. Someone with resources, access, and a long-term plan. Why are you telling me this? He paused. Because, he said, I have my own reasons for wanting the Kang family stable. And I have my own reasons for wanting whoever is running this operation exposed. She didn't trust him. But she believed him. And right now, belief was what she had. I need to tell Min-Jae, she said. I would hurry, Ryu said. Because whoever did this won't want you to talk. She turned to go back inside. She made it approximately 12 steps. Then something hit her from behind. Not a blow, a pressure, a cloth over her face, and the world went white, then gray, then nothing. She woke up tied to a chair. The room was concrete. Industrial. An empty warehouse, she guessed, from the acoustics and the cold. Her wrists were bound behind her. Her ankles were secured to the chair legs. She was not blindfolded, which she had learned in one terrifying evening of internet reading was either a good sign or a very bad one, depending on whether the people who had taken you cared if you could identify them later. Ryu Taesung was sitting across from her. Not as a prisoner. As the man in charge. She understood immediately. The garden conversation. The information. The timing of the cloth over her face. You planned this, she said. I planned several things, he said pleasantly. The information I gave you was true, by the way. I wasn't lying about the DNA manipulation, or the artificial conception. That part is completely real. Then what is this? He stood, straightened his jacket. This is the final act. Your pregnancy causes confusion inside the Kang family. Min-Jae believes you've betrayed him. His advisors fracture. His allies pull back. His enemies move in. He spread his hands. By the time the dust settles, the Kang syndicate is in civil war. And I consolidate everything they've lost. And me. He was quiet for a moment. You were never meant to survive to explain the truth. The warehouse was cold. Amma looked at the concrete floor and breathed carefully, thinking with the part of her brain that didn't do panic, the part that looked for numbers in chaos and found the patterns. The pattern here was, Ryu had revealed himself. He was talking rather than acting. That meant either he was waiting for something, or he was delaying for a reason he hadn't disclosed. She needed to find out which. How long have you been planning this? She asked. 18 months, he said. Since before you were contracted. The London event was arranged. The fertility clinics. The money flowing to medical research. Something moved in his expression, surprise, quickly concealed. You found that, he said. I found $400 million. I didn't understand what it was funding until now. She kept her voice even. You were building the infrastructure. An illegal IVF operation. Genetic material collection. Off-book laboratories. Impressive, he said. Not sarcastically. You were better than we expected. Who is we? He smiled and said nothing. There's someone else, she said. Someone inside the Kang family. You didn't do this alone. He checked his watch. The warehouse doors exploded inward. The sound was enormous. An industrial door blown off its tracks, steel shrieking against concrete. And then the flood of Min-Jae's men pouring through the gap with weapons drawn, moving in the precise, coordinated pattern of people who had done this many times and knew exactly what they were doing. Ryu was on his feet, reaching for his weapon. The next 60 seconds were chaos, shouting, gunfire, the percussion of a firefight in an enclosed space. Amma wrenched at her restraints and got nowhere. She ducked as low as the chair would allow, pressing herself down, making herself small. Min-Jae came through the door last. She saw him before he saw her, crossing the warehouse floor with a gun in his hand and an expression on his face she had never seen before. Not the cold control she knew. Something raw and terrified underneath the action. Something that looked like a man running toward the one thing he could not afford to lose. He saw her. He was crossing to her when Ryu emerged from behind a pillar. The shot cracked through the warehouse. Min-Jae spun and went down. Min-Jae. Her voice tore out of her before she could stop it. He hit the floor on one knee, hand pressed to his side. He looked up at Ryu, who was taking aim again, and then everything happened simultaneously. Two of his guards converging on Ryu, a shot, Ryu going down. And then Min-Jae was back on his feet despite the blood darkening his shirt, crossing the remaining distance to her, and cutting her wrists free with a knife she had never seen him produce. Her hands came forward. She grabbed his face. You're shot. I've fine. You are not fine, you have a bullet in you. It grazed, he said. He held her face in his hands. His were shaking slightly, which she had never seen before. I'm sorry. I should have. Minnie. I should have listened to you. I should have come to you instead of. Stop. Her voice broke on the word. You're bleeding. Stop talking and let them. The baby. His hands moved to her face. Are you? Did they? We're fine. She covered his hands with hers. Both of us. We're fine. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he pulled her in and she let him, pressing her face against his shoulder. The uninjured one. She was careful about that, and breathing him in while the warehouse was secured around them, and someone called for medical assistance, and the city waited outside, indifferent and enormous. I know the truth, she said against his shoulder. The DNA test was manipulated. The pregnancy was artificially created using both our genetic material without our knowledge. This baby is yours. It's ours. She felt him go very still. Then slowly, she felt something release in him. Some enormous held tension. Some weight he had been carrying since the results came back. Some terrifying grief he had not let himself express. His arm tightened around her. I know, he said quietly. I know. I'm sorry. Medical came. He was treated, reluctantly, insisting on standing while they worked on him. She sat on an overturned crate and watched him and thought about the word home, and what it had meant at various points in her life and what it meant right now. In this cold warehouse, with this complicated and dangerous and deeply decent man bleeding through his stitches, because he had come for her. The penthouse that night was quiet. His injury was clean. The bullet had passed through the muscle above his hip without hitting anything vital. He was stitched and medicated and absolutely not following any of the resting instructions. Standing at his usual position by the windows with a glass of water, and his usual expression of a man who had filed away the discomfort and moved on. She stood next to him, soul stretched out below them, lit and alive, indifferent to everything that had happened in the warehouse and everything that had happened in this building over the past 3 months. The person inside your family, she said. Ryu said someone else was involved. Someone with access and resources. I know. His voice was quiet. Do you have a name? He didn't answer immediately. She looked at him. He was looking at the city with an expression she couldn't fully read. I have a suspicion, he said. I've had it for a long time. I didn't want to be right. Min-Jae. The elevator chimed. They both turned. The doors opened. The woman who stepped out was perhaps 60, with the posture of someone who had spent decades expecting rooms to rearrange themselves around her arrival. Her hair was silver and immaculately kept. Her dress was the dark, expensive simplicity of someone who had never needed to signal wealth, because everyone already knew. Her eyes swept the room. The medical kit on the counter, the blood on Min-Jae's discarded jacket, Alma standing at the window, and her expression disclosed nothing. Her eyes landed on Alma's stomach. Mother, Min-Jae said. Madame Kang Soo-jin looked at her son with an expression of absolute composure. I heard there was an incident, she said. It's handled. Good. She looked at Alma again. Directly, the way powerful people look at objects they are assessing rather than people they are seeing. And you. The auditor. The wife. The faintest pause. The mother. Alma held her gaze. Madame Kang looked at her stomach for a long moment. Then she said, with the quiet certainty of someone reading a verdict, that child will never inherit the Kang Empire. The room went very still. Min-Jae stepped forward. What did you say? His mother looked at him, and in her eyes was something that Alma recognized from the financial documents. The particular quality of someone who has been running a long game, and is not particularly afraid of the moment when it is finally seen. I have given my life to this family, Madame Kang said. I have protected its future with decisions you were never meant to understand. Everything I have done. What have you done? Min-Jae said. His voice had gone to that quiet place. The dangerous place. A pause. She looked at Alma. Then back at her son. The injury you suffered 3 years ago. The doctors who told you the consequences. The genetic material that was collected while you were recovering. Her voice was measured. Precise. The London reception. The London woman. Alma felt the floor tilt slightly. I arranged the pregnancy, Madame Kang said. I arranged all of it. The word fell into the room like a stone into still water. You. Min-Jae's voice fractured. I needed an heir I could control, she said. A child raised inside this family, with the right genetics, the right lineage, but with a mother who could be removed at the appropriate time. The DNA manipulation was meant to give you cause. To dissolve the marriage cleanly. To allow me to raise the child myself as I raised you. You are telling me, Min-Jae said very slowly, that you drugged my wife. That you violated her without her knowledge. That you engineered a pregnancy without the consent of either parent. And that you manipulated a DNA test to make me believe she had. I did what was necessary for. Get out of my home. Madame Kang did not flinch. She looked at her son with an expression that was, in its own way, the saddest thing Alma had ever seen. A woman who had loved something so much she had broken it, and who did not yet understand that it was broken. Min-Jae. You will leave this penthouse. You will not return without my explicit invitation. You will speak to no one in this family until I have decided what to do with what you have just told me. A pause. And if you attempt to come near my wife or my child again, he said, I will show you what I learned from my father. Madame Kang looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked at Alma. And in that look, Alma saw something she hadn't expected. Not defiance, not calculation, but a flicker of something that might, in different circumstances, have been recognition. One woman to another. The acknowledgement that whatever else was true, Alma had won something tonight that Madame Kang had not anticipated. Then the elevator doors closed. The penthouse was silent. Min-Jae stood with his back to her for a long moment. Then his shoulders dropped fractionally, and he turned around, and he looked at her with an expression she had never seen on his face before. Open, unguarded, stripped of every layer of control. I'm sorry, he said. For all of it. For doubting you. For the distance. For not. Min-Jae. I need you to know that I know, she said. She crossed the room to him. Carefully his injured side. She put her hand on his chest over his heart. I know, she said again. He covered her hand with his. Outside, Seoul moved and breathed and continued in its vast and different way. Inside the penthouse, in the quiet aftermath of everything, Serwaa Owusu stood with the father of her child and the man she had not planned to love. and let herself believe, cautiously and completely, that what they had built in the ruins of a contract was real. But in the elevator going down, Madame Kang Soo-jin stood with her hands folded and her face composed. And she thought about the message she had sent 3 weeks ago. The message that had not yet been answered. And the person she had sent it to, not Ryu Tae-sung, who had been a useful instrument and nothing more. Not any of the lawyers or advisors or security personnel, who had implemented pieces of her plan without understanding the whole. Someone else entirely. Someone who had helped her build the infrastructure, the clinics, the technology, the $400 million. Someone who had very recently stopped responding to her messages. Someone who had plans of their own. The elevator reached the lobby. Madame Kang walked out into the Seoul night. And somewhere across the city, a phone rang. If you made it to the end of this story, you are the reason we do this. Drop a comment telling us what moment broke you, what moment you screamed, and what moment you knew Alma was never going to lose. Subscribe to Oyinelle Afro-Korean Romance right now. Because the real mastermind behind everything you just watched, the person who helped Madame Kang build all of it, they haven't even introduced themselves yet. Like this video. Share it with someone who needs a story tonight. And we'll see you in the next episode.